It's funny because whenever people talk about J-horror and rattle off some of the bigger names like The Ring and The Grudge, people are frequently also tossing out The Eye. But it's actually not Japanese, and it's from China, but it rode that whole wave of American remakes of Asian horror. But as we dive into this series, you're about to find out that the US wasn't the only country interested in this story. So, let's take a look. We start in 2002 with The Eye, which was not a sequel to the A, the B, the C, D, E, F, G, and H. We're introduced to War Kan Mun, who is blind and has been so since the age of 2, and undergoes a transplant to restore her vision. It's a success, and she's able to see, but sees hazy people at first. Everything is new, like mirrors, and she befriends a child undergoing a brain operation. That night, she sees a shadowy figure leading one of the patients out of the room, but since her eyesight is still unclear, she's unsure of what she's seen. The next morning, the patient is revealed to have died in the night, and she's released, continuing to see strange people about. But, as we see in the next scene, because she's never really been able to see, she still doesn't recognize common objects so easily since she's never seen them before, and has to touch them to figure out what they are. She sees film of herself from 7 or 8 years ago, and she's like 12 or so she's around 20 or so now. She encounters a neighbor kid in the hallway, but it turns out that he's not there. She's a violinist for a foundation for the blind, but now that she's sighted, she loses her place on the orchestra. And there's an original PlayStation here with some games that are all from the mid to late 90s. So we're at the very least post 1994, the earliest a PlayStation would have been available. Mun sees ghost images in her room and then is attacked by one, and her encounters start to increase. When she sees a young boy hit by a car, she sees the Shadow Man again, leading his spirit away. She has a particularly spooky elevator encounter, and then finds out that little Ying Ying didn't make it through the operation. And Mun gets a shock when she realizes that the face that she sees in the mirror is not actually her own. To find where her eyes came from, they go to Thailand, and they were from a girl named Ling. She had visions as well, and hung herself after a huge fire that killed 300 people. She tried to warn people, but they didn't believe her. And there's this calendar up on the wall here, and we get a close-up of it, and it's on September of 2001. And there's a chance that it's not current, but since they used her eyes for transplant, you probably have to assume that it wasn't that long ago that she died. So it's likely that it's a current or close to current calendar. So I'd say that we're either in late 2001 or maybe early 2002. They resolve Ling's unfinished business with her mother, but as they head home, she sees a large number of the Shadow Men, so she knows a mass casualty event is about to occur. Unfortunately, like Ling, no one will believe her, and a gas explosion destroys everything around. Mun is saved, but burning debris robs her of her sight once more. So the next step along the way probably isn't what you think, but that film was such an international hit that it was decided to do a remake of it. But not here in the US, in India. So, in 2004, 2 years after the original, Adhu was released, and the version I have was not subtitled, so it's not totally clear everything that was going on, but it seems to follow the same basic plot. Mira is blind, so she goes for the transplant, and it's successful, but she starts having some weird visions. Some are some pretty 2002 level digital effects, and there's a reproduction of the elevator scene. Things get a bit more intense in this one with an exorcist-like floating bed scene, and it heads a bit more into the vengeful murderous ghost area, even disintegrating a dude down to his skeleton, because this is much more about the spirit of the woman whose eyes were used than ghosts in general. Seems that she was wronged by her village to a greater degree than the original Ling, and is getting her revenge. But I know what you're asking. I mean, this is a Bollywood film, right? So is there any songs? Yep, but it doesn't arrive until almost an hour and a half in, and it's the only one in the film. It's also just a song, not like a musical number, so the cast isn't singing or dancing along or anything. This one also differs in that there's a big martial arts battle, and no ending disaster, and instead ends with Kyle Vizzy exploding the village leader from the inside out, which, yeah, is pretty wild. And not in the spirit of the original, really. It ends with Mira at peace and still with her sight. I didn't see any dates in this one, so I guess 2004 works? That same year, in 2004, China released a sequel, again directed by the Pang brothers, who made the first one, and this one introduces Joey here, played by Shu Qi of the Transporter fame. And her boyfriend are having issues, and she's despondent enough that she takes a bunch of sleeping pills to try to kill herself. She's saved and tries to start over, but starts seeing people who aren't there. We're told it's 1 month later, and her phone tells us that it's October of 2003. So that's when we're set, and it's about 2 years after the first film. She's still pining over Sam and discovers that she's pregnant, and then thinks that she sees a woman jump in front of a train. After trying to reconcile with Sam, she's attacked by a man who is then attacked by an unseen force, which mangles his face. She continues to see people who aren't there and witnesses a leftover effect from The Grudge in an elevator, and she learns that there's 2 times in life that humans are sensitive to seeing spirits: when they're close to death and when they're conceiving life. And since she's had both experiences, she's fully open to their world. Her visions start to ramp up, including splatting people, and we get to 8 months into her pregnancy, so we're definitely into 04 now. And her sonogram shows a ghostly image, and finds that the spirit woman that is stalking her is trying to be reincarnated as her baby. And right about now, you're saying, hey, what does this have to do with an eye, and eye transplants, and Mun? And the answer is nothing. This is completely unconnected to the first film, and just a separate story. Eventually, Joey tracks down who the ghost woman was, and it turns out it was Sam's wife! And Joey was the other woman. When she discovered that her husband was having an affair, she threw herself in front of a train. So she's trying to become her own husband's child? Unable to face that, Joey tries to kill herself, but is unsuccessful. So tries again, but the ghost won't let her die. The woman speaks to her, and Joey realizes that there's no dark nature to it, and the baby is born, and she accepts it, and still sees ghosts all waiting to be reborn. But that's not it, because 1 year later in 2005, there was another Indian version, this time called Naina. It begins in 1986 with an eclipse and a car accident, which causes little Naina to go blind, and then jumps to present day, and that little girl is of course grown up. And again, no subs, but again the plot seems similar, with the eye surgery and the little girl, although one in a much more obvious bald cap, like they barely even tried. And unlike Adhu, this one is a much closer remake, nearly shot for shot at times, including a more exaggerated art school ghost, and of course the elevator scene. The ending plays out mostly the same, just with more extravagant looking set pieces, and instead of a fire on the road, we get a subway accident in London. Of course, she's also unsuccessful and loses her sight in the process, and there's no date here outside of them saying present day, so we'll go with 2005, present day when the film was released. And you know, no musical numbers at all. Also in 2005, we bounce back to China for the curiously titled The I-10, also known as the I-Infinity, or just the I-3. It kicks off with an exorcism ritual, and I'm not sure if this is meant to be hilarious or not, but it is. The demon forms a giant tongue and smacks everyone with it. There's then a group of young folk on a trip together, and they see a horrible accident, and then tell each other spooky stories, although they are also kind of silly. One boasts out a book about the 10 ways to see ghosts. The first one is getting a cornea transplant, referencing the first film. The second is attempting suicide while pregnant, referencing part 2, and they say that they've heard cases about those, indicating that the first 2 films are in the same universe, and this is also. The book is actually a game they decide to try to play using the third method, the Ouija board. It kinda works, so they move on to method 4, going on the streets and tapping chopsticks on a bowl in order to draw in hungry ghosts. It works pretty well, and they see a number of spirits and get pretty freaked out. But they keep playing. The next method is to play hide and seek at night while carrying a black cat, and it's pretty apparent that this is a much less serious take on the subject of seeing ghosts, especially when this guy goes to pee on a tree and ends up relieving himself on a spirit kid. He ends up vanishing and they freak out a bit, and while trying to find him, April ends up doing the sixth method, rubbing graveyard dirt on your face, giving her a vision of her eyes falling out. They all try to go back to their lives, but they continue to have spooky encounters and accidentally activate the other methods, such as number 7, opening an umbrella inside, and number 8, brushing your hair at midnight in front of a mirror. And then number 9, looking out from under your legs, my personal favorite method. At one point, we get a look at some security footage that tells us that it's 2004, so this is later in the same year as the Eye 2. And there's a variation on the elevator sequence from part 1, and a dude kicks a kid. And if you thought I was joking about this not being that serious of a film, there's a ghost dance-off. Like, the guy gets possessed and starts convulsing, and everyone thinks he's doing a performance. They realize that they have to complete the game in order to break the curse, and the final method is to sleep in funeral garments. They do it, and I'm not sure how it's considered completing the game when they didn't do the first 2, but I guess since other people did them, it counts? They go to the ghost's world where they discover that they can hold off the ghosts using their breath, but I guess their farts are more effective? And they find Gofei, but it's revealed that April committed suicide because she was despondent about not being able to find Gofei. They escape the ghost dimension, but Gofei stays behind with April, but they're trapped in ghost form, cursed. It ends with another young man finding a book, and that was the end of the Chinese trilogy. 3 years later, in 2008, the US decided to take a shot at it with The Eye, and their version has a Sue Storm, blind since the age of 5, and also a violinist. And this is pretty true to the original film. Sydney has the surgery, and Hit Girl is the Yin-Yang character, and geez, Amityville Horror, Carrie, Let Me In, Dark Shadows, The Equalizer, Suspiria. Is it basically like we're doing a remake, grab Chloe Grace Moretz? Sydney's operation is a success, and her sister is still looking for the busy bee, and like the original, sees the dark form leading the old woman out of the room. The plot pretty much then follows the Chinese version to a T, just a more exaggerated and less subtle version of it, and at one point watches an episode of The Dresden Files, which aired from 07 to 08, so we're at least past 07. It's then basically a shot-for-shot remake, elevator and all, with the donor coming from Mexico instead of Thailand, although it turns out that the Eye Girl's mom is from Mars. Her village is also destroyed in a fire after she tried to warn everyone, although there's some difference in that the ending is an interaction between Sydney and the spirit of Anna, while Anna's mother passed away from a heart attack. There's a backup at the border where Sydney has the vision of disaster, but in probably the biggest difference from the original, she's actually pretty successful in getting people to flee and saving everyone's lives. She does, however, still lose her sight again and goes back to being a violinist. So there's no other hints as to the date, but so because of the Harry Dresden, we'll pop this in real time, 08. So there you have it, 6 movies, technically 4 different continuities. The only ones that are connected here are the original Chinese trilogy. There's 4 movies out of 6 here that are just versions of that first Eye movie. So yeah, not a ton of continuity, and these were pretty fun. The Chinese trilogy is fantastic. I enjoy it. First one's great. Second one is decent. It's still pretty darn good. Maybe a little bit depressing. The third one's just a lot of goofy fun. I really enjoyed that one. It was just dumb, silly fun. I do not like the American remake at all. And the first Indian remake, the Adhu one, was a lot of fun because of their whole taking the whole revenge plot into a different direction was a blast. So I enjoyed that. If you enjoy these, if you like when I cover Asian horror and the remakes of them, let me know that down below in the comments. Let me know other series that you would like to see. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/movietimelines. I'd appreciate that. These guys are my patrons. I thank them very much for their support, and I'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.